Charlie Mitchell was having what he called a classic Tuesday. It was the kind of day that begins with a coffee spill, escalates into a missed train, and culminates in an awkward elevator ride where you accidentally make eye contact with someone who's clearly just as miserable as you are. By the time he reached his cramped cubicle at his dead-end office job, he felt like he'd been hit by a bus, backed over, then hit again for good measure. As he sat down and opened his email, he glanced over at his co-worker, Gina, who was busy crafting her fourth PowerPoint of the day. "Hey, Gina," he called out, trying to inject some levity into the dreariness of the office. "What do you think? Should I quit my job and become a professional fortune cookie writer?" "Sure, Charlie. Your first fortune can be, you will soon receive an unsolicited email that will change your life." She chuckled, barely looking up. He snorted at that, wondering how many times a day he'd read that exact line in various formats. But right then, an email notification pinged in. He opened it, expecting another tedious report request. Instead, he found a message from an address he didn't recognize. "Congratulations. You have been selected to embark on a life-changing journey to the sacred mountain, where your soul will be judged." Charlie raised an eyebrow, glancing around to see if anyone else had gotten this bizarre email. But everyone else seemed too consumed in their own cubicle woes. He continued reading. "In order to achieve a pure heart, you must complete several trials that will awaken your soul. Please RSVP by noon tomorrow, or you will miss this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity." Sacred mountain? Really? Charlie muttered under his breath. He imagined a bunch of hipsters sitting cross-legged, sipping herbal tea while discussing their chakras. He was not interested. With a deep sigh, he replied with a sarcastic, "Thanks, but no thanks," and clicked send. He was about to dismiss it entirely when his other co-worker, Dave, sauntered over, munching on a bag of pretzels. "What's that?" Dave asked, peering at the screen. "Just a ridiculous email about some mountain trial for my soul," Charlie replied, rolling his eyes. "Apparently, if I want to get to a pure heart, I have to climb a mountain and face my inner demons or something." Dave grinned. "Dude, that sounds awesome. You should go. I'd pay to see you try to confront your inner demons." "What are you scared of, spiders? Clowns? The idea of having a heart? Very funny." "I think I'll pass," Charlie said, waving him off. But just then, Gina chimed in with a smirk. "You know, Charlie, you'd probably lose a bet if you didn't go. What if you actually find enlightenment up there?" Before he could retort, Dave was on it. "I'll bet you $50 you won't do it. If you go and you don't come back with a pure heart, you'll owe me $50. But if you do come back changed, I'll pay you." Charlie sighed, but a spark of mischief flickered in his mind. "Fine. I'll take that bet. How hard can it be?" And so, it was set. With a haphazard grin, he accepted the challenge, feeling a sense of rebellious excitement. He would climb the sacred mountain, and he would return with a story that would have everyone in stitches. The next day, armed with nothing but a half-eaten granola bar and an overstuffed backpack, Charlie found himself on a bus headed to the sacred mountain. The further he traveled, the more the scenery changed. The city's gray concrete gave way to lush green hills and vibrant wildflowers, and Charlie couldn't help but feel a twinge of anticipation. After a couple of hours filled with questionable music choices from the bus driver and an unfortunate encounter with a woman who thought her emotional support iguana needed to sit on Charlie's lap, they finally arrived. The sacred mountain loomed majestically before him, its peak shrouded in mist. Charlie squinted at the signpost that read, "Welcome to Sacred Mountain. Prepare for the trials of the soul." The sign was surprisingly cheerful, complete with a cartoon sun smiling down at him. He snorted. If only his soul could feel as cheerful. As he trekked up the winding path, he came across a curious sight, a group of people dressed in colorful robes, chanting in unison. They turned to him, and a tall man with a scraggly beard approached, his face serious yet oddly comforting. "Welcome, traveler. I am Sage Tenzin, guardian of the sacred mountain. You have come seeking the judgment of the soul?" Charlie tried to keep a straight face. Yeah. That's me. Charlie. Just trying to win a bet, really. Sage Tenzin blinked, processing this with all the solemnity of a mountain monk. "Very well. The trials will test your heart and spirit. Only through sincerity and honesty can you attain purity." Charlie nodded, trying to appear contemplative. "Got it. Let's do this." The first trial took place in a cavern adorned with shimmering crystals that sparkled like stars. Charlie stepped inside and found himself facing a large, ornate mirror that seemed to hum with energy. The moment he looked into it, he was not met with his reflection, but with a wild distortion of himself, a Charlie who looked incredibly unkempt, with a suspiciously larger nose and wild hair that resembled a bird's nest. "Who is this?" he stammered, trying to poke the image, only for his hand to pass through. The mirror spoke back, its voice booming. "This is your truth, Charlie. What do you see?" "I see a guy who needs a haircut," he replied, half joking, but the reflection morphed, showing him moments of his past, his worst mistakes, the people he'd hurt, and the times he'd chosen sarcasm over kindness. He felt a knot in his stomach as memories flooded back, not all of them good. "Face your fears, acknowledge your faults," the mirror urged. Charlie shifted uncomfortably. Okay. I'm kind of a jerk sometimes. Can we move on?" The mirror shimmered and then showed him a scene from high school, his best friend, Jake, who he had abandoned during a tough time because he thought it was too much drama. Charlie's heart sank. "I'm sorry, man. I should have been there." With that acknowledgement, the mirror flashed, and the image faded. Charlie stepped back, breathing heavily, realizing that this was just the beginning. The second trial awaited him in a valley filled with thick fog, where echoes of laughter and whispers surrounded him. Here, he faced a gaggle of his past mistakes, personified as people in ridiculous costumes. There was the ex-girlfriend he ghosted dressed as a ghost, and his old boss dressed like a literal bad boss, complete with a cigar and over-the-top bravado. "Charlie, you're a loser," his ex-ghost wailed, floating around him. "Yeah. Well, you were too demanding," he shouted back, half laughing and half regretting his choices. One by one, they emerged from the fog, making accusations about his selfishness. "You left us when we needed you," they cried, their voices blending into a cacophony of guilt and regret. Feeling overwhelmed, Charlie threw his hands up. "I get it. I messed up. But I can't change the past. I'm here now, trying to make it right." The fog began to clear as he spoke, revealing a serene landscape. Suddenly, he felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted. The echoes faded, and he realized that acknowledging his past was a step toward healing. The trials continued, each more bizarre than the last. In the Garden of Compassion, he found himself surrounded by animated plants, each representing someone's problems. One plant was wilting because a woman felt unloved, another was growing wild and tangled because of someone's fear of rejection. Charlie approached a particularly sad-looking flower. "What's wrong with you?" I'm lonely, the flower replied in a small voice, drooping further. Hey, I know how that feels, Charlie said, not quite knowing why he was talking to a plant. What if I told you that you're not alone? There's always someone out there who cares. As he spoke, the flower perked up, its petals slowly opening. Really? Of course. Just because you can't see them doesn't mean they're not there, he encouraged, feeling oddly inspired. Charlie spent hours helping each plant, and with every word of encouragement, he felt his heart expand. By the end of the day, the garden was alive with color and laughter, each plant thriving. Charlie had learned a valuable lesson about the power of kindness and compassion. As the final trial approached, Charlie found himself in a steep, rocky area that led to the peak of the mountain. This would be the hardest part of his journey, both physically and metaphorically. Climbing higher, he struggled with each step, the weight of his past mistakes pressing down on him like a heavy backpack filled with rocks. This is ridiculous, he muttered, panting. I should have just stayed at home watching cat videos. But deep down, he knew he had to finish what he started. As he reached for a handhold, he suddenly slipped, tumbling down a few feet before catching himself. Okay. I'll take it slow, he shouted to no one in particular. With a renewed sense of determination, he forged ahead, each step feeling lighter as he recalled the lessons he'd learned. It was as if the mountain itself was guiding him, whispering encouragement with the rustling winds. Finally, he reached the summit, breathless and exhilarated. The view was breathtaking, with clouds dancing below him and the sun setting in a brilliant display of colors. He had made it. The top, Sage Tenzin awaited him, standing proudly. You have faced the trials and embraced your truth. Now, prepare for the final judgment of your soul. Charlie gulped, realizing that this was it. He was about to be judged, not by some mystical force, but by the very essence of who he was. As he stood there, heart racing, he took a moment to reflect on his journey, the laughter, the trials, the moments of vulnerability, and he felt something shift inside him. I've learned a lot, he began, his voice steadier than he expected. I've learned that being perfect doesn't matter. It's about accepting your mistakes and striving to do better. I want to be better. Sage Tenzin nodded, a smile spreading across his face. You have already begun your journey toward purity of heart, Charlie. The judgment is not about punishment, it's about understanding and compassion. In that moment, Charlie felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He realized that he didn't need anyone else to validate his worth, he had already begun to forgive himself. He had learned to be kind, to empathize, and most importantly, to accept his imperfections. Thank you, he said, feeling a rush of warmth wash over him. As he prepared to leave the mountain, Charlie realized that this journey was only the beginning. He would return to his life with stories to tell, jokes to share, and a heart that was lighter than it had ever been. With the weight of judgment lifted from his shoulders, Charlie felt lighter as he stepped away from Sage Tenzin, who remained a serene presence against the backdrop of the magnificent sunset. The colors danced in the sky, echoing the warmth in his heart. He had come to the sacred mountain seeking a whimsical adventure, and instead, he had stumbled upon a profound journey of self-discovery. As he began his descent, he couldn't help but chuckle at the absurdity of it all. Who would have thought that he, Charlie Mitchell, king of sarcasm and couch potato extraordinaire, would find enlightenment on a mountain trip? He imagined himself returning to the office, regaling his co-workers with tales of talking plants and emotional mirrors, their eyes widening in disbelief as he shared every outrageous detail. Hey, maybe I could write a book about this, he mused aloud, grinning at the thought. How to Find Your Soul, a guide for cynics and skeptics. The trail wound down, and as he walked, he replayed the lessons learned in his mind. Each trial had chipped away at his hardened exterior, revealing a softer, more genuine Charlie. He was starting to understand the beauty in vulnerability, the strength that lay in admitting mistakes, and the necessity of compassion, not just for others but for himself. As he reached the bottom of the mountain, Charlie spotted a small gathering of people near the base. A few were drumming, while others danced around a bonfire, the atmosphere filled with laughter and music. The energy was infectious. It seemed like a celebration, a welcoming committee for those who had completed their trials. He felt a rush of exhilaration. "Hey, you made it," one of the dancers shouted, spotting Charlie. She was dressed in flowing garments that swayed with her movements, her hair adorned with wildflowers. "Come join us." Charlie hesitated, glancing back at the mountain. He had faced his trials, but this was a new challenge, connecting with others without the armor of sarcasm he usually wore. Yet, the warmth of the bonfire beckoned, promising acceptance and joy. He stepped forward, allowing himself to be swept into the festivities. The drums pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat, and as he joined the circle, he felt the music wash over him, unearthing laughter he hadn't known he'd buried. People greeted him with open arms, and he found himself sharing snippets of his journey, embellishing the absurdities to keep everyone entertained. "You won't believe the mirror that showed me my true self," he exclaimed, mimicking its booming voice and the wild reflection that had greeted him. Laughter erupted around him as he animatedly recounted the garden of compassion, his struggles with the wilting flowers, and his surprising success in bringing them back to life. In that moment, Charlie felt an undeniable connection with these strangers. They weren't just random people, they were fellow travelers, each with their own stories of struggle, growth, and a shared experience that transcended the mundane. The laughter that surrounded him was more than just entertainment, it was a celebration of life, imperfections, and all. As the night wore on, Charlie found himself dancing, the rhythm pulling him in, loosening the remnants of his previous self. The shadows of the past slipped away, replaced by a vibrant present. For the first time in ages, he felt free to express joy, to be vulnerable, and to connect with others without fear of judgment. Eventually, the drumming slowed, and the dancers began to settle down, the atmosphere turning contemplative as they gathered around the fire. A woman named Mira, who had been at the forefront of the festivities, began to share her own journey. Her voice was soft yet resonant, and as she spoke of her trials, her struggles with self-worth, and her eventual path to acceptance, Charlie listened intently, captivated by the honesty in her words. "It's like we're all pieces of a puzzle, aren't we?" Mira said, looking around at the group. "Every struggle, every triumph brings us closer to the picture we're meant to create." Charlie nodded, feeling a swell of agreement. The mountain had been a pivotal point in his life, but it was these connections that truly grounded him. He realized that his journey didn't end with the trials, it was just beginning. As the fire flickered and the stars began to blanket the sky, the group shared their hopes and dreams, their fears and regrets. Charlie found himself revealing more than he ever thought he would, opening up about his past mistakes and how they had shaped him. There was a sense of camaraderie, a collective understanding that no one was alone in their struggles. Eventually, as the fire dwindled to glowing embers, Mira leaned in closer. "What about you, Charlie? What do you hope to take back from this experience?" He paused, searching for the right words. "I want to be more open. I've always hidden behind sarcasm because it felt safer. But now I see how much I've missed by not letting people in. I want to cultivate compassion, not just for others, but for myself too." Mira smiled, her eyes sparkling in the dim light. "That's beautiful. And you'll find that the more you share your heart, the more others will open theirs in return. With that, the night began to wind down, and the group slowly started to disperse. Charlie exchanged contact information with a few people, promising to keep in touch. As he began his trek back to the bus stop, he felt a sense of gratitude swell within him. The journey hadn't just been about reaching the peak of the sacred mountain, it had been about the connections made along the way and the growth that had occurred because of them. The bus ride back was quieter, the weight of the world no longer pressing down on him. Instead, he reflected on everything that had transpired. The laughter, the tears, the surprising moments of insight. He felt lighter, freer, and more alive than ever before. Returning to the city, he found himself walking through the familiar streets with a renewed perspective. The vibrant colors of the storefronts, the laughter of children playing in the park, and even the hustle of commuters rushing to their jobs felt different now. It was as if he had put on a new pair of glasses, and the world was brighter, filled with possibility. When he arrived at the office the next day, Charlie braced himself for the usual banter from his co-workers. As he entered, he was immediately bombarded with questions about his trip. "Did you find your soul?" Dave teased, raising an eyebrow. "Or did you just find a bunch of hippies?" Gina chimed in. Charlie chuckled, feeling a sense of warmth in their camaraderie. "Actually, I learned a lot. You guys might want to sit down for this." As he recounted his adventures, his encounters with the mirror, the dancing plants, and the profound connections he'd made, his co-workers listened with rapt attention. Their laughter filled the room, mingling with the stories he shared. He felt a sense of empowerment, no longer hiding behind sarcasm but instead embracing the joy of storytelling. By the end of his recounting, Charlie found himself smiling genuinely. So, if anyone's looking for some soul-searching, I recommend a trip to the sacred mountain. Just bring an open heart and a sense of humor. The office erupted into applause and laughter, and for the first time in a long while, Charlie felt accepted. He no longer felt like an outsider in his own life. The experience had changed him, and now, he was ready to embrace the messiness of life with all its imperfections. In the days that followed, he made a conscious effort to apply the lessons he'd learned. He started small, offering genuine compliments to colleagues, being more attentive during conversations, and even volunteering at a local shelter. Each act of kindness filled him with a sense of purpose and fulfillment he hadn't known he was missing. One afternoon, while volunteering, he met a woman named Sarah, who had been struggling to find her footing after a recent loss. As they spoke, Charlie found himself sharing pieces of his own journey, the trials he had faced, the moments of humor that had lifted him, and the compassion he had learned to cultivate. Sarah listened intently, her eyes widening as he recounted the tales of the sacred mountain. "You mean to tell me there's a mountain where you can literally confront your soul?" she asked, a mix of disbelief and intrigue in her voice. "Yup. It's a real trip, literally," he replied with a wink. "But the real magic happens when you allow yourself to be vulnerable and open. That's when you truly find connection." As they shared their stories, Charlie realized that he was not just recounting his adventure, he was actively living the lessons he had learned. He felt a deep sense of connection with Sarah, and as he listened to her struggles, he understood the power of empathy. Weeks passed, and Charlie continued to grow. He surrounded himself with friends who encouraged authenticity and open-heartedness. The cynicism that once clouded his outlook faded, replaced by a genuine desire to uplift others. One evening, as he sat in a cafe with Mira, who had become a close friend, he reflected on how far he'd come. "You know, I almost didn't go to the mountain. It felt silly at first, like I was just chasing some ridiculous notion of enlightenment," he admitted, stirring his coffee. Mira smiled warmly. Sometimes, it takes a little silliness to break down the walls we build around ourselves. You were brave to step into the unknown. Bravery, Charlie echoed, considering the word. I think it's less about being fearless and more about embracing the fear and moving forward anyway. As they shared laughter and stories, Charlie felt a profound sense of gratitude. The journey was ongoing, filled with new experiences and lessons. Every day brought opportunities for growth, connection, and laughter, and he was ready to embrace it all. Months later, he found himself back at the base of the sacred mountain, this time with a group of friends from the office. They stood at the foot of the majestic peak, looking up in awe. Are you really going to do it? Dave asked, a teasing glint in his eye. Of course. It wouldn't be right not to share the experience, Charlie replied, his heart swelling with excitement. Let's see how many souls we can awaken today. As they began their ascent, Charlie felt a sense of belonging, not just among his friends but within himself. He had transformed from a cynic to someone who embraced the absurdities of life, learning to laugh at himself and finding joy in every moment. And as they climbed the mountain, sharing jokes and laughter, he knew that he had come full circle. The sacred mountain was not just a place, it was a state of mind, a reminder that every journey, no matter how silly or serious, could lead to something beautiful. With each step, he cherished the connections he had made, the lessons he had learned, and the heart he was continuing to cultivate. The soul judgment was no longer a singular event, it was a continuous journey, one that filled his life with laughter, compassion, and an ever-expanding capacity for love. And as they reached the summit together, surrounded by the breathtaking view and the warmth of friendship, Charlie looked out over the horizon with a smile, grateful for every trial, every connection, and every moment that had led him here. The story of his journey was far from over, it was just beginning, filled with endless possibilities and a heart ready to embrace them all.